Imagine the complex and devastating reality of armed conflict, where military objectives are sometimes deliberately positioned in or around civilian areas. What happens when one side knowingly places innocent people in harm's way, effectively using them to shield military operations or prevent attacks? International Humanitarian Law, often abbreviated as IHL, directly and unequivocally addresses this grave issue. It strictly prohibits the use of civilians as shields. This means it is absolutely forbidden for any party to a conflict to move or concentrate civilians or other protected persons in order to shield military objectives from attack or to impede enemy military operations. This prohibition is deeply rooted in the foundational principles of international humanitarian law. It primarily upholds the principle of distinction, which requires all parties to a conflict to differentiate between combatants and civilians, and between military objectives and civilian objects, at all times. Using civilians as shields fundamentally violates their protected status under the Geneva Conventions and their additional protocols, effectively transforming them into unwilling tools of war. Customary international humanitarian law also confirms this rule, making it a universal obligation. In practical terms, for any armed group or state that considers or implements such a tactic, the primary obligation is to immediately cease this illegal practice. For the attacking force, even when facing an adversary that illegally uses human shields, the principles of distinction and proportionality still apply. This means they must still take all feasible precautions to avoid or minimize civilian casualties and damage to civilian objects, assessing whether the anticipated military advantage outweighs the expected civilian harm, which can be an incredibly challenging assessment. Furthermore, using civilians as shields is widely recognized as a war crime under international criminal law. Individuals responsible for ordering or carrying out such acts can be held accountable, even if the primary intent was to protect their own forces or assets. This legal classification reinforces the severity of the prohibition and the international community's commitment to protecting the most vulnerable during wartime. Ultimately, the clear prohibition against using civilians as shields underscores international humanitarian law's unwavering commitment to protecting human life and dignity amidst the brutal realities of war. It places a critical responsibility on all parties to armed conflicts to prioritize civilian safety, ensuring that innocent lives are never deliberately jeopardized for military gain, and upholding the essential lines of humanity during hostilities.